Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Tour du Monde Stage 2. This is your commentator, Derek, and I'm glad to be back after a serious illness over the Christmas period. But no more about that, we'll just crack on. And if you hear a little bit of coughing, that's just the remnants of me clearing out my chest. But we've got an exciting race coming up. Yesterday kicked off with the individual time trial, and we had some pretty good racing. What I'm going to do is I'll run through what happened yesterday very quickly with you, so that you know the individual standings, and then we'll move on to I think we've got 90 riders signed up for this, the third session. We've already had 2 run-ins of the event today. The first at 1 o'clock European time this morning, and the second was at 7 o'clock European time, which I think is 6 GMT. So I'll give you the results of those 2 races, and let's have a look and see who's in the driving seat at the moment for this stage 2. And as I say, I'll cover what happened in stage 1 while we're covering the race. There's going to be more than enough opportunity to do that. So let's quickly drop in then and have a look at what happened on stage 2. And our current leader is, I think, is it Troy Tompkinson? No, it's not. I think we had, let's just go back. Troy Tompkinson was first place in the 0100 running of the race. But he was overtaken in the second running, the 0700 running of the race, and he was beaten by a few seconds, well, by 9 seconds to be exact, by Nick Hall from Team TFC. Nick Hall is currently leading the standings with a 1 hour 2 minute 34 second ride and an average watt kilo of 346. So Nick is going to be holding the banner until we start, and we're due to start now. We're just going to the start line. You can clearly see on screen the ride profile, and we start with a bit of a downhill, as you can see, and then a little bit of rolling terrain with a steep short climb until we get into that last third of the race. And you can see it's a long enough climb, I think, to sort out the riders, and I think that's where the break is going to happen. We may well see riders going clear on that first short sharp climb, but I don't think we'll see the real contenders until we get to the final climb, which is about 2/3 distance into the race. We've got some of the big hitters like Sonderberg, Byham and John Beams. In this edition, you can see they're underway now. We're looking at an overhead shot, and expect the leaders to more or less form up and form a bit of a group on this first section. It's a slightly downhill slope, but then it levels off, and in fact even goes up. Well, here we go, it's going up now. You can see 1.7%. Goes up slightly higher than that when they hit the orange, but not enough to be significant. We're going to see this large group staying together, I think, for a little while yet, and I don't think it's until we hit that short sharp climb in a few kilometers before we're going to see the big hitters really pull away from the chasers here. I mean, that's the usual scenario that we've seen in these kind of races. But the Tour du Monde, I mean, it's a different animal. It's by far the best series race on RGT, and you see all kinds of tactics coming into play, mostly team tactics, where the teams try and keep their riders up towards the front so that they can help when the action really starts to take place as the group splits up. You can see now the front group has formed up, so I don't know exactly how many riders we've got in this front group. I suspect it's around the 38-40 mark. and anybody not in this front group will not get back on now. So if you're not in the top 40, you're not going to be able to close the gap to this fast moving group. Now, I think this is a tactic from Mard. He's pulled off the front because he wants the pace to be high from the start to try and keep down the numbers that managed to make this front group. That hasn't really happened. They've still got 40 riders in this front group. So the tactic here to sort of like raise the pace right from the gun, I don't think has worked as well as they probably hoped it would. You are going to see people, you've seen Mard now being consumed by the main panel, and you can see closely behind this group of 40, not too far, in fact we can see it on screen quite clearly, you can see the chasing pack in group 2. And while I said they won't close the gap, they've got riders that are looking strong enough to pull at least a few of the riders over. I don't think all the ones chasing are going to make the bridge, but I think, yeah, this is pretty good, folks. I didn't expect so many of the riders left behind to be able to close up, but they're working well together. And yes, there's about a 50-meter gap. The question is, can they work well enough together for all of them to close it? You can see the guy in purple off the back here. He's going to have to burn a match to get back in amongst his compatriots, the chasing group. And this is really going to hurt those riders behind. Their legs are going to be screaming because they're working incredibly much harder than the riders in front, because they're not taking effect of the huge draft that the front group are getting. So while some of them may well get back to this front group, and you're seeing them do so, they really need to tuck in amongst that big group and get some recovery fast. Because I do feel like a lot of these second chasing group are going to be shelled. They're going to have made such a big effort to get back onto the front group. And this is just classic racing tactics. Keep the pace high at the front as a large group, and try and whittle it down by, you know, a series of pushes off the front. And we're going to see that tactic clearly playing out. Now, as I say, please excuse any coughing and spluttering I do, folks. I really have been very ill over this last couple of months, and I'm glad to be back. It's great to be back, but I still have sniffles and the cold. So the chasing group have done very well. You've got these two riders, Akulla and Placido. They've dropped to 48, 49, 50. Stuart Hall in 50th here, with another rider, and I'm surprised there to see Sonderby dropped off the main group. That is a big surprise to me. Very strong rider, and he's obviously been caught napping, because you wouldn't expect a rider of his class to have been dropped at this early stage. And these riders here, there's some good riders amongst this group. So I think what's happened is perhaps some of the riders just didn't expect the pace to be so high from the off and were caught unawares, just more or less trying to find their legs. But there's no time for that when it's a downhill start. The pace, you know, is going to be absolutely screaming right from the off, and you saw that by the fact that you know, we had those riders going off the front of the group pushing the pace up. So my guess is that this group here that we're watching, and we'll call them group 2 because I think they are group 2, we might have a few riders in between. These riders are not going to get back, folks. I'm sorry, but it's just not going to happen. This group are away now, so however many, and we will count them as we go along the road. This group is basically where the leaders are going to come from, obviously. I mean, that goes without saying. But this large front group are away now. We'll check the gap shortly when we move further down the field. But Yeah, thanks, Paul. It's great to be back, lad. I'm sorry I'm not in 100% condition, but it's great to be back commentating. I love this, as you know. Um, I really get a big buzz from commentating and giving my wisdom to the ride, because I generally, folks, have a good clue as to what's happening tactics-wise. I've got so much experience over the years from both live and e-racing that I can generally call the tactics pretty well. And you can clearly see that riders in this front group, the big hitters, the stronger riders, are pushing the pace along at the front because they know they don't want to give that second group even a whiff of a chance to get back on, because there are some really good riders in that second group. And so these riders pushing off the front, including our own Keith from OTR, he's probably the best veteran in this race. Keith is helping push the pace along, but you've got some of the real big hitters here on the front, making sure they're working well through and off. As you can see, the tactics here. This is really good racing, folks. When you see riders taking short turns, doing pulls through and off like this, you know the pace. Well, you can see from the rider pace. The pace is 43.5 kilometers an hour on a slight uphill. I mean, 0.4%. So these guys are not hanging about. They're really motoring. They're really putting in the big efforts. I mean, when we get into the single screen version, you'll be able to see the colours at the side of the name changing. And, excuse me, you can actually watch the riders' efforts and see when it goes orange, you know that's a pretty strong effort. When it goes red, you know that's a max effort that they are putting in. So the riders will be settling down a little bit now. They've got a good gap. They're not going to get caught by the second group unless they really do ease up. And they're into you can see from the white paddle at the bottom of the screen, they're into what we call the transition stage of the race, where more or less they're into the valley. Yes, they've got a small rise coming up, but it's basically the terrain now is nice and shall we say flattish for this kind of racing, for just pushing the pace along nice and steady, a bit of through and off, a bit of team tactics, you know, get your team together, get them working well, stay in the draft, try and save some energy, and then really push hard when we get to the next climb, which is going to be critical. We'll see in a moment when the course graphic comes back on screen at the bottom, as we're looking at Robin Sanderson. Thanks for your well wishes, Robin. It was nice to speak to you this morning. Robin is a really good OTR rider. You can see his stats here on screen, and he's tucked nicely into what is, for me, the perfect position when you're doing a race like this. He's tucked nicely behind the front riders, not showing his head off the front, and just basically, as is Joris from OTR, from Rasio, Joris Shapers, he's doing the same. It's the perfect position to be in, just off the front, but close enough to watch for anybody trying to break, you know, in case 3 or 4 riders decide they want to break off the front. As we can see here, we've got Soderberg and Mard. Now, Mard is one of the stronger riders in this edition of the race, the third running of this race today. And I believe Mard will be working for his teammate, John Beams. Although for some reason, John Beams is in the RGT, the Team 3R racing kit, so maybe I'm told he's riding the Tour du Monde for Team 3R, which is pretty amazing when you think about it, a rider of his class. And Mad, I think, will be just trying to keep the pace high to make sure that this front group is kept more or less together. Now, I've just seen Nick Greenhow. He's in this front group, as you would expect. He's a class rider, so expect Nick to be up there towards the end, but there are so many good riders I could name here. So I'm not going to try and, I mean, it's not fair to try and just pick out a few, but when I do, as I say, there's some really classy riders here, including Byam, Clive Byam, Daniel Schock here. But there are really, in my mind, only 3 or 4 contenders for the win today, and that's not doing a disservice to others. That's just I know who the stronger riders are because I've covered racing on RGT long enough now to know who the contenders on this kind of a stage are going to be. And the great thing about the Tour du Monde is you can follow the stages and you can say, okay, well, he's the favourite today, but he definitely might not be the favourite tomorrow when the terrain changes. I think this kick up towards the end of today's stage and then the downhill is going to suit a particular type of rider, but we'll call that later in the race. I'll tell you who I think is going to win today's race later on. For the time being, we've got various riders pushing along at the front. We've got Phillips and Greenhalgh working together from Rassio along with Rowbottom. So, you know, Rassio Racing have got a good group here towards the front, and in fact Parks as well. So they've got, I've counted at least 6 riders, Rassio Racing, are bossing this race, which is a tactic we saw last year. If you remember, we saw this tactic from OTR in the early part of the Tour du Monde 2021. And how well did that work for them? It worked fantastically well. So Rassio Racing are doing similar kind of tactics. They're bossing the front of the race, and this is going to be exciting. I think Rassio are going to want to put their riders on the podium, if not take the win today, and they may well do so. As I say, we'll call that later on. But it's going to be an exciting race, folks, because I really believe that this kind of a stage is going to make for unexpected breaks, shall we say. I'm really looking forward to when it hits this second big climb and we see the big hitters take off. But in the meantime, you can see the main group here, and then we've got a brief look back at a couple of riders behind, including Blackmore from OTR, who's now being joined by a couple more riders from what looks like Team Lou. It's really nice to see such good teamwork from the riders in the Tour du Monde. I mean, we've got numerous teams now with the necessary 6 riders in each team. So people like OTR are fielding multiple teams, Rassio are fielding multiple teams, as are pedalers. So it's nice to see. And we'll have more on the team standings as we go further into the tour. Excuse me. It's early days yet, so we don't really have team standings as of now, but we will produce them for you as we move forward further into the tour. Individual standings, as I say, I'm going to go through those once this race settles down a bit, and I'll do that during, you can clearly see on the profile, once they get over this short sharp climb and onto the plateaus of after the second short climb, I'll then give you the results of day 1. I don't want to break away from the action at the moment, because this is what I expected to see. Somebody like Mard pushing off the front, trying to break up the peloton. And I think he will do it. I think he will pull a few riders off the front of this group. If not on this short climb, then certainly on the next one. Excuse me. And yes, I'm going to have to take a drink of water, so just bear with me for a moment, folks. Okay, we're back. So as you can see, Mard is doing as expected. He's pushing off the front, pushing the pace up, hoping that a couple of riders will pull away from the group, and you can clearly see that tactic is working. He's stringing out the group. This is a long enough climb for that to happen. I don't think they'll shell everybody from the chasing group. You can now see it's a long line, but what this will do is it will sort out the contenders. Now, some of the bigger riders, or what I call the big hitters, will definitely come back on the downhill section on the next rolling section across the plains. But then we've got another short, sharp little climb, which is further going to have an effect on splitting the main group. But it isn't really until we get to the final climb, the big one, where we're going to know who's going to take this stage. I'm pretty sure by the time we get there, and you can see Lundqvist, who's one of the riders I'm pegging for being there at the finish, along with Van der Wiel. And Van der Wiel, by the way, is currently leading the standings, so he'll want a good performance today, which is why he's caught Mard and working well with him. Now, if these three riders, Lundqvist, although they've left Lundqvist in the wake, he needs to chase and get on. But if these three riders could get, shall we say, a 200-metre gap going into that second short climb, the fact that they are good climbers, they could well open up a significant enough gap to stay away. So we'll watch this gap. It's currently about 140 metres. Maybe a little bit less, 100 metres. So they've got 100 metres at the moment. Now, if they can grow that to 200 metres, I think that's going to be enough to take them into that final climb, and they would stay ahead. So we'll see if my tactics play out, whether that works, or whether John Beams and his fellow riders can close this gap. The fact that Mard is in this front group from Pedalers and Robin's having turbo problems is telling me. Sorry to hear that, Robin. I'll check up on you later, mate, but I hope you get it sorted. Yeah, so my feeling is that Lundqvist is struggling to hold on to Mard and Van der Wiel, who I feel are the two stronger riders in this trio, and they're proving that. But Lundqvist is very canny. He will try and do the drafting. He will try and stay with them. But Van der Wiel and Mard, I think, are just a slight class above Lundqvist. He's a very good rider, but I would expect him to get dropped, to be honest. We'll see what happens. And as Paul Nicholls, you can clearly see on screen, Paul Nicholls is our resident Magic Roads guru. He's the one that usually does a lot of the OTR Magic Roads, but our, shall we say, second guru and amazing, road builder is Samir from Samir's Magic Roads. And Samir, he did last year's Tour du Monde, and I have to say it's probably the best race I've covered on RGT by a long shot. And he's done the same this year. He's done the roads for the Tour du Monde 2022, and we've yet to see what he's got in store for us, but if looking at what we've seen already is anything to go by, it's going to be a treat, folks. Samir doesn't do poor roads. I've ridden a lot of his roads, I've commentated on a lot of them, and they're just stunning. They're superb. So these three are managing to stay together. Lundqvist, I'm a little bit concerned that he's constantly having to burn matches, pulling back to these two, and that he's going to pay for that. He's going to pay for that towards the next climb. This short, sharp climb may well see him not be able to stay with these two up the front, but we'll see what happens. I hope he does. The more the merrier at the front for me in terms of excitement levels, because I'd rather see a couple of 2 or 3 riders than just one solo rider go off the front. Makes it a little bit more exciting. And in fact, I'm really hoping that these riders shooting off the front now will get caught, but we're not really going to know that until we get over this next rise and see what kind of a lead they've got. I said about 200 metres, and if they carry 200 metres into that final climb, they're not going to get caught. So we'll see what happens. I really enjoy trying to calculate. I mean, John Beams is on his own now in 4th place, and he's closing. So John is putting in a really big effort here to try and close the gap. Now, we saw him do this in races at the end of 2021, where John would put in huge efforts to get back to riders that had broken off the front, but then he really paid for it. But I think John has got A, a little bit fitter, and B, I think he realises, you know, just how much he can afford to expend before we get into the final stages now. He's a little bit more race aware on RGT, having ridden that little bit extra. So expect John to really get his tactics well worked out. He knows what he's doing. He's one of my favourite riders to watch, and I'm really excited to see him coming back to that front group, and hope he does get back on. I think he will. He's definitely got the class to do that. Now, the riders behind, Schock, Verkick and Shapers et al, and Greenhaug, obviously, Rowbottom, most of these are Rasio Racing. You can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that I've counted Rasio Racing riders just behind John here, 100 metres behind, and I genuinely think that they can close that gap before we get to this next climb. So we could see 10 or 11 riders actually going into that final big climb, and that's going to lead for more excitement, folks. Now, Lundqvist, I said he was not the stronger of these 3 riders, and here he is proving me wrong going off the front. But I think he'd have been better served working with the 2 riders behind and not going off the front. We'll see whether I'm right, or we'll see whether Lundqvist can take it, but I think he's doing himself a disservice by going off the front here. He'd be much better off working with these 3 riders, working as a foursome, saving some energy, and then if he's got the strength, going later on in the race. Now, he's already proved me wrong by jumping off the front, but we'll see whether he manages to hold it. I don't think he will, and in fact, here we go, these riders are pulling him back very easily. Now, either he's eased up, which I think he has done, and realised, look, I'm not going anywhere, I'm going to work with this team here. And that's what he's got to do. That's common sense. Pushing off the front so far from the finish with such strong riders chasing is just nonsense. And again, forgive me for I'm very forthright, folks, in my commentary. I tend to say it how I see it, and I don't always take into consideration the rider's feeling. So I apologise if I upset anybody when I call out my tactics, but generally I'm usually pretty accurate, so I think I know what I'm talking about. And it's not doing a disservice to any of the riders when I claim that they're maybe the weakest of the group. It's just come from experience of watching riders and how they ride, and knowing when a rider's burning matches. Now, the term burning matches comes from riders having to close small gaps, like you can see Lundqvist doing here, having to close small gaps to get back onto a wheel. We call that burning a match, and you only have so many, as we see them going under the yellow halfway mark. So that's the yellow halfway banner they've just gone under. And Lundqvist has now got back on a wheel, but he burnt a match in doing so. And you only have so many matches in your box to burn. before you actually run out. Now these guys are not that far behind, so could we see a coming together? This is going to be exciting. We're on to the what I call the plain or the valley, the flatter section of the ride now, and we've got a few kilometers of this to go, so we could see a coming back together if this group works well together, but we'll have to wait and see. This is group 3 that we're watching now on the road, with Keith and Vanbers and Sondergaard rather, and others working well together. And then we're working his way further down the field to watch the riders further behind. And generally what we tend to do on the ZMS feeds is we generally tend to watch all the riders coming to the finish. So we usually stay with the racing, unless there are riders that are a long way behind at the end. And then, in fairness to both the commentators and to Damon, who's putting out these live streams, it's not really fair to expect them to stick around, you know, for really long periods of time. If they've got another broadcast, which I know Damon has, Damon's doing another series this evening. So, and I possibly am going to try and ride a little bit of this stage tonight. But to be honest, I was hoping to ride the whole Tour du Monde, various stages, at my own speed, which would be slow. But I don't think I'm even well enough to do that at the moment. So maybe I have to wait a little bit longer before I start thinking about racing again. As we watch riders further back in the field, forming small groups. And that's the correct tactic. Makes no sense on this kind of a course where you've got so much flat terrain to ride as a solo rider, in between riders. Try and get yourself into a small group and stay together. Now it's nice to see our 4 riders are still together, all 4 of them. Lundqvist is doing his part, and Van der Wiel is pushing along the pace on the front. Now, as race leader overall, Van der Wiel obviously may well be the strongest rider of this group, but I think John Beams and Mad and Lundqvist might have something to say about that. I mean, Lundqvist, while I called him, I think he's going to pay for his efforts early on, but if he doesn't, he's certainly been a race winner and stage winner in the past. So he's got the pedigree to take this one if the others are inattentive and allow him to jump off the front. So they've got to watch him, but I think they've got his measure. And we'll call the possibly 1, 2, 3, 4 once we get to this final climb. You can see the pain cameras here, John Beams in his pain cave. He's always got that open mouth, heavy breathing look about him, so you know he's really working hard. You know, we watched him all the way through the Tour de Suisse, or the Tour du Alps as it was renamed to, because John had his pain camera on for every stage of that race, and we were able to see the kind of efforts he was putting in. And I love to see this, and I think more riders, and if you're listening, the likes of Mad and Van der Wiel, you could do yourself a great service by getting yourself a webcam and joining John in the pain room. It's very easy to do. You simply follow the link that Damon from ZMS will give you for his Zoom meeting. You simply send a link and then you join the Zoom meeting, and there you are on camera. And I do think more of the top riders should do it. I know they're verified. I'm not calling them out for not being verified, because they are. But it would be nice to see you on screen actually working hard, and we can then compare. We can compare you against John and the others. as we watch Versick and his compatriots trying really hard here to get back on. But now that's a bit of a surprise, seeing Van der Wiel. He's taking a bit of a breather off the back, but he's going to have to burn more than one match, I think, to get back here. So while he's a strong rider, he can't afford to do that. Trust me, folks, having to do this, having to put in an extra effort to get back to a wheel, you pay for it later in the ride, and John Beams proved this to us in the Tour du Alps. We saw him having to do that, and we saw how it cost him one of the stages. So you can't be inattentive and drop off the back. You've got to stay on the wheels. But we're very quickly going to arrive at what I think is going to be the determining point of this race. These four riders, make no mistake now, I was really hoping that Solly, Rowbottom, Shapers and his friends would close the gap. They got it down to about 200 metres, but then because Lundqvist jumped off the front to up the pace, and because then the rest of the guys were chasing and upping the pace, Mad did his turn, I think it was fair to say that they upped the pace and the following riders were unable to match it. And the gap is now growing. It's not only gone up from 200, it's now gone up to 550 metres and is growing. So they're not going to pull these riders back. Even the climbers in Group 2 are not going to pull back significant time on these four riders up the front. So our leader and winner is going to come from these four. And to be honest, with the likes of Van der Wiel, Mad and Beams and Lundqvist in this group, all four of them have won stages. So we've got, not in this particular tour because we're only on stage 2, but all four of these are stage winners in past races. So we're going to see quite a good battle here between these. Who's going to prove to be the strongest? Well, we know that Mad is around about the same level when it comes to the climbs as John. I think that would be fair to say. Van der Wiel, we know he's a very good climber. Lundqvist, I've watched Lundqvist go. Now if Lundqvist is going to win this, he's going to have to go from distance. He's not going to be able to match these guys at the finish for pace, definitely not. He's going to have to go for a longer option. But they have to stay together now. They can't afford to break apart. And I think actually they will break apart on this next climb. I think we're going to see who's going to be taking the first and second spot. I think Greenag will be a bit disappointed that this group weren't able to hold on with the leaders, because again, he's a class rider. And I think he would have expected to be in with a shout. Now you can see Damon has put on board on screen the live leaderboard, and we've got Van der Wiel is in first place, Mad is in second, Lundqvist is in third, and Beams is in fourth place. So that's the leaderboard as it currently stands, but I think that's going to switch around today. Samut, now he's a good rider. I've covered him quite a few times. But this group, they're basically working for their own race placings now. They're definitely not going to get back on, and they'll know that as well as anybody else. So my guess is that this group will work together until they get to the climb, and then possibly see who's the strongest among them and try and sort out the minor places. Yeah, Damon's just told me that the live leaderboard is for this race only, of course. So this is how it stands for this race, not for the overall. My apologies there. I was assuming it was, but of course you can clearly see that the positions are changing places with John taking over the lead. But I think when you've got 4 riders so close together, the live leaderboard, while useful to sort of like see what position the riders are in, is not really relevant to position on the road until they start to split up. And I think we're going to see them split up further towards the front when we get back to them. But we're watching riders further down the field, which is always a nice thing to do. We have a really good OTR. You saw 2 riders there. You can see Mike Aid here. Further back, he's riding on his own, and Mike really, he's 120 meters behind the group in front and 80 meters behind 3 riders behind him. So he needs to join 1 or 2 of those rides. Don't try and ride on your own, Mike. It's a lonely place to be, mate. I really like these transitions that Damon has come up with. They look really nice. Yeah, Thomas Peterson, you can see on screen, he's voting on Mard, Henrik Mard, for the climb, and I think he's not far off. I think Mard will attack on the climb. We'll see. John is the rider that may, because he's a bigger rider, he's good and he's strong, but John may be the one of the 4 that struggles on this climb. And what he will try and do, John will try and hang on to the lighter riders in front of him, and if he can stay within a reasonable distance or even with them up this climb, then John is definitely a contender for the win. But he may well get distance on this climb, so we'll keep an eye on that. I think it's fair to say he's the one that out of these 4 that's the most likely to get distanced. But he's doing a fantastic job of staying with them. And if he does stay with them, and I hope he does, there we go. Now we've gone over the first steep section, we've got another steep section. It eases back slightly to around the 5% mark. You can see that happening here, but then it rises up again for a short distance. Here we go, it's starting to rise up again now, as you can see, and it gets pretty steep towards the top of this climb. I think we go over 10%, so yeah, there we go, look, you can see. So this is going to sort them out a little bit. There's the over 10% I was telling you about. Now it's happening quickly as I'm calling it, but I've had the pleasure of being able to look at the profiles prior to the race. I always try and do a little bit of homework, folks, so that I get a good feel for what's going to happen in my commentary. And you can see here it's getting steeper towards the end of the climb, as I mentioned, and it does kick up a little bit. So John is doing fantastically well hanging on here. Lundqvist is really riding well, but he is a good climber. John's in pain, as you can see. We got Clive. Now Clive's further back in the field, no less in pain, but hiding it well. But John is really you can actually see the pain on his face. Excuse me. And how, you know, how much of a struggle this is for him. And as I say, riders, please consider joining the Zoom pain room, because it really gives us an insight into the kind of efforts you're putting in, and it's good to see. We love to see riders doing this. John's struggling to get enough air in. I know that feeling. But I mean, this is just absolutely stunning and amazing to me. He's managed to stay with the other three riders, and because he's managed to do that, John is now in with a real big shout of taking the stage. The question is, is he going to pay for it? Is he going to, he's had to put in a supreme effort to stay with these riders. Are they all going to be together to the finish? There's a short, sharp climb just towards the end, and my feeling is that won't suit John. I do think that he'll catch the two riders in front along with Mard, so I think the four will come back together. But I think that short, sharp kick at the end of this stage, and when we get back to seeing the profile, you'll see what I mean. There you go. So look at the very, very end of the profile. You can see that red section, and it's only very short. It's only probably less than a kilometre, but that's going to be enough for the true specialists to kick on and get a gap. And I do believe John will get dropped there. And I'm sad to say that, because I'd love to see John take this stage, but I don't think he will. I think they'll get back to these two riders in front on this section, so they'll come back together, but I don't think he's going to be able to compete on that short, sharp final climb. And it pains me to say that. There's John coming back, going straight through. Now there's enough time here, and certainly you can see the blue section. Now the blue section means that the downhill is quite steep. So they've got a short blue section coming up, but then they've got that longer blue section. And that's almost an opportunity to freewheel. I don't think they will freewheel, but it is almost an opportunity to do so. You can see Lundqvist, his watch dropped to 0, so he is freewheeling. And some of the riders will do that. I mean, it's a personal thing. I personally, depends on the situation, tend to freewheel quite a lot, which is why I fall well behind. But some riders will pedal through and keep the pace up. But it's a chance to get recovery now. John's still pushing out 4+ watts, so he's working really, really hard. But I think he'll recover on the blue section and get back some of his karma, some of his energy. But will it be enough to get up that final spike? Now I'm going to call Van der Wiel as once again the winner today. I just think he's looked, even though he had to burn that match that I called earlier on, maybe more than one, he has looked probably the strongest of these four riders. But Mard is doing a wonderful job here, pushing the pace along on the front. But again, I don't think this is a valid tactic. I think this is just wasting energy. He's not going to leave behind those three riders in front. So pushing out, almost 5 watt kilos to try and get away from them. Yes, he might well be the bigger rider in these four riders. I don't know the weight. I'll have to check on that later. But he could well, he could well be the heavier rider. So he's trying to get the distance before we hit the climb to give him a bit of an advantage. But it's not going to pay off. They're pulling him back. It's not going to work. They're not going to let him go. And with that short climb coming up, I think they're all more or less going to hit it together. And then it's just going to be who's got the strength to shoot up it and take the win. And my call is I think Lundqvist will do quite well. I expected him to be dropped by this stage, I'll be honest, and that's not doing him a disservice. It's just I tried to watch the race earlier, and when he was burning matches, I was a bit concerned for him, thinking he wouldn't be able to hold on. But he's done a wonderful job, and he could well be in with a shout along with Van der Wiel on the final climb. So Lundqvist for second place. I mean, Mad is doing really well at holding him off out at the front here with John behind, but it's not. I don't see it happening. I don't see it working. If Mad does take a 100-meter gap into the final climb, then yes, there's no reason why, because it's such a short, sharp one, there's no reason why he couldn't scream over the top. But I don't think he'll have 100 meters by the time we get to the climb. Yeah, as Christoph Contant says, splendid, Henrik. And this is nice to see. It's great to see riders prepared to go for it. I mean, Henrik knows what he's doing here. He knows that, you know, if this doesn't come off, he's probably going to finish towards the end of these four riders at the end of the stage. So this has to come off for him. Now, another scenario is if John Beams joined him, but that's not going to happen. What I was going to say is if John Beams joined him and they were able to get a gap, but that's not going to happen because you can see Van der Wiel and Lundqvist have now closed up on John, who's closed up on Mad. So my prediction that it's all going to come together towards the bottom of the climb is going to, I think, prove true. All these four riders are going to be together. And they're going to approach the bottom of that climb together, and then it's just going to be an all-out. What's everybody got left? Exciting racing, folks. I'm enjoying this. Hope you are too. And we'll see how close my predictions are. I've got a pretty good track record at the moment during the tours. Whoa! Look at that. These riders are trying to sort out their positions and placings, because obviously they're fighting for 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th and 10th, these riders. That's how many you've got in this group. So we've got 5th to 10th place battling it out here, and this is going to be an exciting race as well. Make no mistake, just because the leaders are broken clear and we know that these riders are not going to contest the win, doesn't mean there's not going to be excitement in the placings lower down the field. And in fact, some of my better commentary has been on the minor placings races, because they've been more exciting, quite frankly. While I enjoy commentating on riders that have got the strength and courage to break free and take solo wins, this is the kind of racing I enjoy the most. The fighting it out amongst individual type racing, like we've got between the first four and then these following six. I love this style of racing. It's always nice to see a strong solo rider, but it's even nicer to see a strong group approaching the finish. And who's your money on out of these riders? Well, we'll come back to that later. We'll analyse this group a little bit later. We're going to be going back to the front group, I'm sure, pretty soon, because that's bound to be getting exciting. Yeah, here we go. Now you can see that they're putting in above threshold efforts here to try and sort it out before we get to that final kick. Van der Wiel, look, is going well into the red, followed by Lundqvist well into the red, followed by Mard well into the red, and John is the only one that's sort of like not in the red there, but he's been gapped. Now, I said this would happen. I didn't expect it to happen at this stage. I did expect it to happen on the Kickr. John might get back to them for the beginning of the Kickr climb at the end, but he's not going to be able to compete. And he won't mind me saying that. He's a slightly bigger rider. As you can see, he's a tall fellow. And he's more of a great all-rounder than a true climber. So the climbers are going to have the advantage here, as it's proving to be the case, as we go under the 1 kilometre to go banner. So this final Kickr was less than a kilometre, as I said, and Van der Wiel is now making his break. And he's made his break just before the climb, but here we go. Now on this climb, expect to see his figures going well into the red once he actually hits the climb proper. And this climb goes to well above the 10% margin. You see the gradient pick up and increase, but Van der Wiel has pulled clear. Lundqvist currently in second with Mard in third. Now this is the order that I called it. Let's see whether this is the order that it finishes or whether Mard can actually overtake Lundqvist. But and I'm not going to say I told you so, folks, but it just I'm usually pretty good at calling the tactics, and it looks like this time, with only 350 meters to go, I got it right. The question is, can Mard and Lundqvist fight it out? Because John's gonna have to settle for fourth place. And I say settle, that's maybe a bit of an unkind word, but John won't mind me saying, I don't think he would have expected to compete at the end of this kind of a stage with that short, sharp Kickr. He'd know as well as anybody else his goal was to try and stay with them, but that he wouldn't be in with a shout at the end, if he's honest to himself, and I'm sure John is. One of my favourite riders to watch, so I'm sure he will have his day on stages that suit him, and there are plenty, believe me. There are some good stages coming up that will truly suit John for the win. Van der Wiel is a good climber, but he's also a good all-round rider. He puts out huge wattage. I mean, he finished with about 5.5 watt kilos yesterday when he took the stage. So he's a strong rider. I think he's an ex-pro. I could be wrong, but I'll check up on that for the next race. But he takes the win. As he goes over the line, Van der Wiel takes first place. Mard is going to set my prediction slightly by taking second. I think, given the work he's put in, Mard probably deserves this, because he's, out of the four, he's probably put in the most work. Lundqvist taking third place rather than second I predicted, so I got first right anyway, and John Beam's taking fourth. Now then, the excitement is going to be building for these guys behind. We can see that Solly is trying to break away from them. He's got a 10-meter gap, but I think the others might have something to say about that. Once we watch John coming over the line, there we go. Now we're going to go to the riders behind. Now Solly has got a 15-meter gap, yep, and you can see the riders behind. Can he hold it? I told you it got steep, folks, 16.4%. I said it kicked up towards the end. So this is pretty amazing. And look at the finishing time, 54 minutes 40 seconds. Now that's a good 8 minutes faster than the previous best time. So an amazing turnaround, a lot faster than I expected. I thought we'd be looking at 56s. So 54, that's awesomely impressive riding. And I think we are going to see what we are, Solly taking 5th place. He's not going to get caught now. He's managed to hold his 15-meter gap. Verkasik behind him is chasing. trying to close it down. He's got it down to 14, but no, he's not going to close this gap. As we watch Solly come over and take 5th place. Well done, Solly, from Rasio Racing. I think he's the first Rasio to finish, and we get a tight between Versick and Linden. So I think Linden just got it. Shapers, and then Greenhow coming over the line. Yep, and then Daniel Shock, our OTR guy. Well done, Daniel. Isifor from Moon Riders. They've got very distinctive green and white shirts, as you can see. Nice to see him. And then we've got Samut coming over from Poco. He's wearing the, I think he's wearing the GB jersey. And Stevens, Vesper. So we've got a lot of riders coming close together here. But this was the racing group, if you remember. Sondergaard, Keith, senior veteran, coming in. Good ride from Keith. Rowbottom from Rasio, another good ride. Peter Brookrival from OTR, my teammate, another good ride. Well done, folks. Olsen, the Dane. Now, I've seen Olsen putting in some really good performances previously, so it's nice to see him going into the red to finish here. As we watch John and Clive's still on the road, obviously. We haven't seen Clive coming in yet, but he'll just be trying to keep it going. John Beams, you could see sitting up there, having done his warm down. As we watch 19th place Olsen coming over the line. Now we should have quite a few riders close together, between the 20s and 30s, I'm hoping. As you can clearly see now, the top 10 on the screen. Now we've got 3R riders coming over, Tobin and Newton. It's nice to see 3R putting in team members into this tour. They had a very poor turnout in the previous tour, the Tour du Alps. So to see them in force in the Tour du Monde. Now this is another one of my favourite riders, Vanbers. A little bit surprised to see that he got dropped away from the main groups, but Vanbers, again, slightly larger rider, won't mind me saying that. He will have his day, believe me. He's a class rider, and my guess is the hills did it for Vanbers, and he will have his day when it comes onto the more rolling sections. Now here we're watching Roy, Rocket Roy Neild. Now Rocket Roy has a webcam. We've seen him doing it in previous editions. So if you're listening to me, Rocket Roy, get that webcam and get in the Zoom room. Parks from Rasio Racing coming over. We just saw a Okolu prior to him coming over the line. So Rasio Racing has a really good turnout in this race, which is nice to see. You can see that on screen now we have 11th to 20th place showing on screen. Well, 11th to 19th. Parks comes in 25th. And two riders slightly behind him, Edge and was it Russell? No, Russell's on his way now. I can't call every name, folks. You can clearly see them yourselves on screen. So because they're arriving so quickly, one after the other at times. We don't have any really large groups to come in. We've just got ones and twos and small groups of 3 or 4 happening. I don't think we've got any really large groups left to come in, but we do have a lot of riders still out on the road. I think we had more than 90 on the start line. I'll check on that a little bit later. And all these riders are still managing to come in below the, well, the top 24 anyway, were able to come in below the 1 hour mark, which is quite impressive. Didn't expect so many riders to crack the 1 hour mark. Soderbergh, another good rider who I think we'll see more of on the more rolling, flatter sections. We've covered him quite extensively in the past. Fuan, I've seen him a few times. And another his compatriots, Sonderby. I once covered a race where the Danes were by far and away the majority of the riders in the race, and it wasn't a Danish race. So they do turn out in force, which is really nice to see. And I think We Bicycle is coming in, but then we've got our own Mike Aid from OTR. Now Mike rode a lot of this, there he is, all on his own, look, and he rode a lot of this race on his own in what we call no man's land, between groups. And something which I would have tried to have joined up with other riders on the road, but maybe Mike, you know, he likes riding on his own. It's hard work though, when you have to, you know, when you're not taking advantage of drafting, or you're not, you don't have teammates or other riders around you. I think it's a lot harder. So kudos to Mike for doing that. And then behind Mike, we have the second webcam that we saw. We have Clive Byham. Now Clive is well known for doing that ridiculous challenge he did. Here he is, big Clive. Don't mind me calling him that. Nice fella. I read his story. I followed him during his challenge, and yeah, it's a rider I like to see. And look, he's putting in the effort here to finish. Well done, Clive. Go, mate, go. Nearly there, fella. Nearly there. Here he is. Look, he's out of the saddle, trying to just get that last place. Look, he's just trying to catch Sorensen. Can he do it? Can he catch Sorensen before? No, Sorensen's going to take him. Oh, he'll be a bit disappointed with that, but I'm sure Clive is happy with his placing. He's done a good ride. Look at the effort. Yeah, well done, mate. I love these webcams, folks. Please, riders, come on, consider getting one. They're very easy to do, very easy to hook up, very easy to get on this stream so that we can show you pain. So watch the who from the Netherlands, which is currently where I'm at broadcasting from. So we're down to round about the 40 mark now. We've had 40 riders coming in. You can see the top 30 on screen. There's a little bit of lag between getting the rider's position over the line and actually putting the riders on screen, but we will show all the results. 1 to 90 I think we've got today. Let me find out whether are we staying with the action to all the fin. Well, let's just find out if we. Because I've no way of knowing at this. I've no way of knowing, folks, how far behind the tail enders are. And as I say, I do know that Damon is working this evening. I'm hoping to come back on, probably do a broadcast of the evening session. Although I may try and ride some of it, if not all of it. So we'll see. I don't feel particularly well enough, but I will only be turning the pedals if I do decide to ride, or I could just commentate on it, see how I feel. It's just great to be back. It's been a long road for me. At one point it was touch and go with the illness, and yeah, I'm just glad to be here and glad to be back doing commentary. So thanks everybody for your well wishes. Very, very much appreciated, believe me. Helped me out of a deep hole. I love doing this. I've been involved in cycling for more years than I care to remember, and because of that, I'm in love with the sport, and I try to give something back. And when Damon asked me to help out with the broadcast, that was my way, well, one of the ways of doing so. But watch out later in the year, because I will actually be running my own event on RGT. More about that in the coming weeks. Yep, OTR with another great performance, Paul. But what else would you expect? You know, class team. But now we get to watch the pain of the latter riders coming in. And yes, thanks Daniel. Where were you today? Didn't see you. We watched Davidson coming over the line. Reuter. Now, I don't know, was that other rider, was he? Caroline Reuter, she's a class rider. I think this is Neil Gordon coming in. Nick Gordon. My apologies, Nick. Yeah, I've got a very poor memory, folks, when it comes to names. I never forget a face, but when it comes to names, I struggle. So if I haven't got them written down, which at the moment I haven't, I generally don't remember, unless they're regulars. Adrian and Gordon smashing it for OTR. Yeah. Well, class riders, Paul. Well, no, you can't just pick out a couple of riders. To be fair, you know, the fact that OTR are not only putting on this event, but coming out in force, you have to admire. I mean, they're just, I think it's fabulous that not only can OTR put on the best events on RGT, but we also can put out teams in force. So what we're looking at there, we're looking at 11 kilometers for the bot ZMS and 9 kilometers for. So we're going to be sat here for quite a while, folks. We've got a lot of riders to come in. Now I'm prepared to sit here because, as I say, if I'm coming back, it's going to be in the evening session later on this evening. I know Damon is working later. I don't know what time, so but he can go off and get himself a cup of tea while I handle the commentary of into the finish or whatever. I really like the new interface. I don't know whether you do, folks. Yes, thanks, Luke. It's good to be back, mate. Yes, I really like what ZMS have done with the interface. They've tweaked it. I like the multi-camera views. I mean, this is my favorite view, where we can see the profile on the bottom of the screen. We can see where the riders are via the white dots, etc. But the multi-screen just gives us as commentators that little bit more information. You know, we can watch where where the second, third groups are on the road, see the gaps in real time, and basically see who the riders are, because when you're following main screen, you can't see who the following riders are all the time. So going multi-screen allows us to do that, because the names pop up more frequently. Some names I recognise here in the results. Canoe. I wonder what if anybody knows what's his real name. I've only ever known him as Mr. Canoe. What's his real name? I should know, because he's part of the isn't he part of the Lou team or something? But anyway, if anybody knows his real name, messages. But yeah, some good names there further down the field, including Mike Wareham, look, from Moonriders. Well done, Mike. Nice to see you on the roster. And as I say, I will try and cover some of this evening's race. So we'll see what happens there. Now we have got a couple of big hitters going for later this evening. In fact, while I'm doing commentary on these last riders coming in, let's just see who is signed up for this evening. So I'll go to the RGTDB site and we'll see who's signed up for tonight, because I believe we've still got some of what I call the big hitters. In other words, some of the riders who are going to affect the overall running of the race, and we still have them to go. We still have a few of those to go. Now it kicks off at 19:45 Central European time, which is 6:45 p.m. UK time. And as I say, I may well be on board for this one. Now some of the sign-ups that actually took part in this race, like it's showing Samut. Now Samut has already ridden, we know. Daniel Nogibar is down to race it. Yeah, I think what I saw earlier was I saw some of the I saw some of the riders signed up for the later showing of this race, and what they've done, they've signed up for the later running and then taken part in this earlier running. So whether that's tactics or whether they've just signed up to both in case they couldn't make this one, as we watch Corinne coming over the line, I don't really know. But we've got Gav Ash from TMC. He's down to ride this evening. Jim Ogov is going to ride this evening. I'm only mentioning a few folks. I can't call every rider out, but they're two notable riders that are going to be riding later on this evening. I think our own Paul Nichols is going to ride this evening. Daniel Neugebauer is going to ride this evening. Yeah, so, but I think some of the riders who I saw signed up for this evening have actually ridden today. So, including Isifor was down to ride this evening, but he's already ridden as well. So the overall leader obviously is still Van der Wiel, of course. I tell you, my memory's terrible. Jonas is still leading the overall standings, obviously with 2 stage wins. I mean, an amazing ride today to take the overall, not just in first place. He actually he took it by 14 seconds from Henrik, and then Lundqvist was a further 7 seconds behind, and John Beams was 23 seconds behind Lundqvist. So very tight. All the first 4 riders, you know, were within a minute of each other, which is pretty impressive for this kind of a stage. And I do think we're going to see some out and out sprints in some of the stages to come. We'll see how that pans out. Haven't even looked at tomorrow's stage yet, but I'm sure when we come towards the end of this broadcast, Damon will put the graphic up on screen and we can have a look at it, see what we've got in store for tomorrow. Not sure what I'm doing tomorrow. I'm pretty certain I'll be covering part of it, but I don't know in terms of commentary what days I'm going to be involved at the moment. I'll update you on that as soon as I can. Mia going over the line. Corridox. Sarah. Yep, I was going to say Sarah, but I didn't dare. But yes, Sarah. Team Lou. Mr. Stephen. Faze Stephen from Team Lou Racing. I love their jerseys, very easily identifiable. Mr. Feldman. Going into the red, as you can see, to finish. It's a bit cruel having an 11.4% slope, like, you know, 80 metres from the finish, but hey, we got used to that with Paul Nicholls, and it seems Samir is cut from the same cloth. Paul Nicholls actually got the nickname Cruella because of his the cruel routes he was putting us through during the Tour du Alps. He doesn't do easy, and it looks like Samir's taken a page from his book. Although I think Samir has been at it for a little bit longer than Paul. Could be wrong. Now we've already seen, as we're watching Stephen Selman, now he's coming towards the finish, so we're almost finished here, folks. I didn't realise we were so close to the finish, but obviously I was looking at the ZMS cameras, and of course they don't ride the full course. So my mistake, we're not going to be hanging around that much longer, only a few more minutes. But we've got Del Vesio here, and we think he's the Lantern Rouge with 6 kilometres to go. So yeah, maybe another 10 minutes or so. And I don't mind hanging around. I love to see the tail enders coming in. What I am pleased to see is that one of the previous superstars of the Tour du Alps was Anne Y. Now, why do I call her one of the superstars? Well, Anne was Lantern Rouge in the Tour, and yet finished every single stage. And some of those stages, folks, took the leaders 2 hours and took the Lantern Rouges, like Anne, 4 hours to complete. Now imagine that, 4 hours on a bike, on your trainer, indoors. I mean, just absolutely amazing, which is why we decided to have a special prize for any rider that stuck it out to the end, and Anne took the prize. It was coincidental, actually, that not only was she the last rider on the road, but she won the prize for the rider finishing all the stages, and she well deserved it for sticking it out. I mean, 4 hours when the leaders finished 2 hours in front of you, that's commitment, and really nice to see. And I think we're going to get to see, are we going to get to see Anne coming in? It would be nice to see her crossing the line. So if we can switch back to the front of the race, please, Damon. And watch Anne coming over the line. She's only got 70 meters to finish. I mean, obviously we've got the results of 61 to 90 on the screen now. The latter three places, 88, 89 and 90, still to be filled. So we're going to have them on screen very shortly. And in fact, we've got 92 riders. So my 90 signed up were joined by 2 more. And Damon must be having a cup of tea, otherwise he'd have switched back to the front to watch Anne coming over the line. But we generally, on these broadcasts, we generally do stick around until the end and watch the last riders coming in. And I've already opined on this many times. We like to do that because we believe that the riders deserve equal coverage. So now this is the last rider on the road, but can we switch to the front? And here we go. So we're going to watch Selman coming into the finish now. He's just got what, 180 meters to do. Then we'll catch Anne Y coming into the finish. Then Jansen, Zigzag, and the final rider who you saw running on that downhill section, Del Vesio. So well done, Del Vesio. You covered that final 9 kilometers. Well, you've done 6 of the 9 very quickly. Mind you, it was downhill. I haven't said that, but yes, you've done well. Excellent riding. So here you can see that we're showing the live results on the screen. And what a good result for Kickr from OTR in 16th place there. I mean, Kickr, the reason why I keep mentioning Kickr is because he's not far off my age, and I'm no spring chicken, but he's a really competitive veteran rider, and I'm always watching out for him whenever I'm commentating or taking part in events myself. I wish I was half as good as he is. And here's Anne, and it's lovely to see her. As I say, Anne got great praise for her fortitude, and Anne even was taking part in the women's competition during the Tour du Alps, and she even took a stage, a ladies' stage win in one of the stages. So she's a bit of a lightweight, so she'll have struggled today on this course. This course is not really the kind that would suit her. Annie's a true climber. She's only lightweight, true climber. So she'll do well, believe me, Anne will do well on the true climbing stages. Well done, Anne. Lovely to see you coming over. And I'm looking forward to seeing her when we get onto the big mountain stages, because she'll certainly be in with a shout amongst the ladies. I don't know, in fact that's something which I will try and find out, whether we're going to have, I'll ask my my boss James Ogilvie, whether we're going to have a separate ladies prize and category for this tour. I assume we will have. We shall see, because I know there's a you know, I'm not putting words in anybody's mouths, but there is team prizes. There's a lot to do. Believe you me, James deserves a bloody medal for the way he sorts all this out. So I'm not saying there will be, but it would be nice if we do get a separate ladies category and prize. But I'll also mention, as we're watching these last few riders coming in, there are spot prizes given away every day by the sponsors, and the sponsors deserve a shout out for sponsoring this race. they donate one prize, which is, I think, is it Keith Aitchison does the wheel of the spinning wheel, where we have the spinning wheel and then give away the prizes. Now I cover this in my news sections, my OTI news room sections, during the Tour du Alps, but because I've been ill and been away for so long, I've sort of like lost touch, and I'm ashamed to say I don't even know, I haven't had a chance to catch up on who all the sponsors are of this tour. But you can see one of the sponsors there is Potrero Hill at the 200-meter mark, and they sponsored the Tour du Alps, the Tour de Suisse, which we named, so they've come back on board for us. I know Torm Cycle Clothing are definitely one of the sponsors for this event, as they were last year. And who else have we got? We've got about six sponsors if we watch Potrero Valley. And sometimes, you know, we may well have multiple sponsors on one stage. So when I say multiple sponsors, we may have more than one prize to give away. That's a possibility. I'll get more up to speed as I speak with my colleagues during the tour and as I continue my coverage. But this is my first day back. This is my first broadcast in a couple of months, and it's been hard work, folks, even getting to this point. So you'll have to forgive me if I haven't done my homework and managed to catch up yet. But it seems, I would guess that, judging by the number of banners, Potrero Valley are going to be the sponsors of today's stage. I think I can safely say that. And so the prize will probably be announced later by Keith. It will be done online. Yeah. And Damon's just agreeing with me that sponsors are shown on the banners. So yeah. And obviously we will call out the sponsors, and my own web feed, my own broadcasting will have the sponsors appearing up on screen at certain times during each broadcast as well. That's something which I do automatically. I get the icons and then I put them on screen. So we will do that. Now we've just got two more riders to come in, Zigzag and Delvesio from the States. So here's the German Zigzag. I'm guessing the A stands for Andreas. Could I be right? I don't know this rider. I don't think I've covered him before. New one on me. I think I'd remember a name like Zigzag even with my terrible memory. But I don't know if we've got any data on him. "300 meters from the finish on the steeper 14, look at that, 14% section. You cool man, you. Samir, 15% even. I said it kicked up, but wow. Let's see if we can find him. Yeah, he's only on RGTDB as A Zigzag, so we can't give you his first name. I'm going to go with Andreas. And that's almost a wrap, folks. Like I said, we'll wait for Delvesio, this rider, to come in. He's just got 400 meters of this awesome last climb to finish. And then we'll pull up the graphic for stage 3, Monday's stage, which I'm looking forward to. and then we'll wrap it up. We'll wrap up the session. ZMS will be back this evening covering the how do you pronounce it? The Prometheus series, the Echelon series. My apologies, Echelon series. Yeah, I've got a terrible memory. I do apologise. But yeah, so Damon's back covering the Echelon series this evening. And for those of you that don't know, you should really tune in, because the Echelon series is the pro racing series on RGT. So you get to see the best e-racers in the world taking part. And I mean, Swift had these some of these riders a little while ago, but Swift Racing is not even comparable to RGT. RGT is more realistic, and I think we're going to see more real-time races coming over to RGT, as well as this Echelon race series that we've got now, purely and simply because of the realism, because of the dynamics, the drafting dynamics, the racing dynamics. I think anybody that's serious about e-racing would want it to be as realistic as possible, and I think our platform RGT offers that. Don't get me wrong, Swift has been wonderful for putting esports out there, but having recently gone over and watched some of the racing on Swift, I can honestly say it still appears to me to be a game. It's not. It's just the tactics that you have to use. The best rider doesn't always win on the day. And to be honest, if a race is fair, the best rider on the day, given good tactics, given a good team around him, should win. They don't always, but they should win. And that's why I love RGT, because RGT gives back to the better riders. Anyway, if you can, check it out. So it's the Racing League Pro Series taking place tonight. I'll get to time for you in a minute, but basically you can catch up if you go to the ZMS or the RGT News website. You'll find details of the whole series. Struggling with this last section, Delvisio. Going into the red, as you can see. So he's doing his best, is the lad, and this must be hurting. An hour and 34 minutes. Hopefully he can get there before the under the 1:35. He's got 30 seconds to cover 90 meters. Can he do it? I think he can. Come on, lad. And thanks everybody for tuning in and watching. I've really enjoyed coming back and covering this event. And you'll see more of me in the very near future. As I say, we're going to pull up the graphic. Come on, lad, see if you can make it. No, it's just going to fall outside the 1:35. Just. Well done. So there's our last rider over the line. And now we're going to pull up the graphic for the stage 3 tomorrow. And for those of you that might know this this course, this is the NASCAR Spider, and it's a representation, as you can see, of a 6-legged spider, where the racers get to ride all the legs, all the arms. Now it's a longer stage, not very much elevation on it, only 132 meters in total, but it's a longer race, 57 kilometers, 58, call it 58 kilometers. And I think this is the kind of race that's going to suit the likes of John Beams and the larger riders. When I say larger, I don't necessarily mean in weight, although it will undoubtedly suit the riders, you know, the bigger, heavier riders. because they're going to be able to use their power on this kind of an event, and it's going to be exciting. I for one am really looking forward to it. So I don't know who's doing the commentary tomorrow. No doubt I will catch up on the series and who's doing what in the very near future. But because I've been away, obviously I haven't been party to all the negotiations, and we'll see what's left. So thanks again, folks. Take care, stay safe, and we'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.